You know that feeling when you're standing at the top of a mountain, looking out at the world below, but instead of feeling triumphant, all you feel is emptiness? That's where I was, well, figuratively speaking. Physically, I was sitting in my tiny studio apartment in San Francisco, staring at a rejection email from yet another VC firm. It wasn't always like this. Once upon a time, I, Ethan Cross, had been the golden boy of Nexus Tech. My name was whispered in boardrooms and shouted at tech conferences. I built their flagship AI platform, Nexera, from scratch, a system so advanced it could predict market trends, optimize supply chains, and even nudge consumer behavior. They called it revolutionary. And they were right. But here's the kicker. After making them billions, they fired me. No warning. No gratitude. Just a cold handshake and a severance package that felt more like an insult than a thank you. So there I sat, unemployed, betrayed, and wondering how the hell I'd let myself get blindsided like this. San Francisco has a way of reminding you who you used to be. Every street corner seemed to echo with memories of late-night coding marathons, celebratory dinners at Michelin-star restaurants, and those endless pitches to investors who eventually couldn't throw money at us fast enough. But now, walking down Market Street felt different. The same coffee shops and co-working spaces that once fueled my ambition now just mocked me. Failure, they seemed to whisper. Even worse were the people I ran into, former colleagues who either avoided eye contact or gave me pitying smiles. Then there was Victoria Langley and Daniel Hayes, the co-founders of Nexus Tech. I didn't see them often, but when I did, it was like staring into the eyes of two strangers wearing familiar faces. They'd changed since we first started the company together. Back then, we shared a vision. Now, all they cared about was profit margins and stock prices. Still, part of me hoped they'd realize what they'd lost by letting me go. Spoiler alert, they didn't. Not yet. Anyway, it started with a text message, one simple line that read, "Check this out." It came from an old friend, Mia, who still worked at Nexus Tech. Attached was a link to an article about how Nexera was being used to manipulate social media algorithms during election campaigns. At first, I thought it was fake news. After all, I designed Nexera to streamline logistics and improve efficiency, not meddle in politics. But as I dug deeper, I found reports linking Nexus Tech to shadowy PR firms specializing in disinformation. My stomach churned. This wasn't just unethical, it was dangerous. And the worst part? None of it would have been possible without the code I wrote. Suddenly, the betrayal I felt over my firing paled in comparison to the guilt gnawing at me. I had created something meant to change the world for the better, only to watch it twisted into a weapon. I spent days debating what to do. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I hadn't seen anything. After all, exposing Nexus Tech wouldn't just hurt them. It could destroy me too. Everything I'd ever done was tied to that company. If I spoke up, I'd be implicating myself in their crimes. But the other part of me, the part that still believed in doing the right thing, couldn't stay silent. So I started gathering evidence. Late at night, I hacked into old servers and sifted through encrypted files. It wasn't easy. Every keystroke felt like stepping closer to a point of no return. And then there was the paranoia. I kept imagining someone watching me, waiting for me to slip up. One evening, as I scrolled through incriminating emails between Victoria and some lobbyist, my phone buzzed. It was a number I didn't recognize. The caller ID simply said, "Journalist." Against my better judgment, I answered. Her name was Sophia Bennett, and she worked for one of the biggest news networks in the country. She sounded calm, professional, but there was an edge to her voice, like she knew exactly how deep the rabbit hole went. "Ethan," she began, skipping any pretense of small talk, "I need to talk to you about Nexus Tech." My heart skipped a beat. How did she know? What did she know? I played dumb at first, deflecting her questions with vague responses. But Sophia wasn't easily deterred. She mentioned names, dates, and projects I thought were buried forever. Finally, she dropped a bombshell. They're using Nexera to influence public opinion on a global scale. And if you don't come forward, they'll keep getting away with it. Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I considered hanging up, but something in her tone made me hesitate. Maybe it was desperation. Or maybe it was hope. Either way, I agreed to meet her, in person, anonymously. The cafe where we met was tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, far from the prying eyes of Silicon Valley. Sophia arrived 10 minutes late, dressed casually but carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd seen too much. We sat at a corner table, our voices barely audible over the hum of espresso machines. She laid it all out for me. Nexus Tech had hired private investigators to silence anyone threatening to expose their secrets. Whistleblowers had disappeared. Reporters had been blacklisted. And if I went public, I'd become their next target. "You have two choices," she said, leaning in close. "Stay hidden and hope they forget about you, or fight back and risk everything." Her words echoed in my mind long after we parted ways. Risk everything or fade into obscurity. As I walked home that night, I realized I already knew what I had to do. I spent the next few weeks living like a ghost, always moving, never staying in one place for too long. My apartment was no longer safe. I'd packed up what little I owned and checked into a series of dingy motels on the outskirts of the city. Each night, I worked tirelessly, piecing together evidence that would expose Nexus Tech's corruption. It wasn't easy. Some files were encrypted beyond my initial ability to crack. Others required me to dig through decades-old backups buried deep in forgotten servers. But every discovery fueled my determination. One particularly late night, I stumbled across something chilling, a series of internal memos detailing Project Erebus. At first glance, it seemed innocuous enough, a plan to optimize global communication networks. But the deeper I read, the clearer it became that Erebus wasn't about optimization. It was about control. They weren't just influencing elections anymore. They were building tools to monitor and manipulate entire populations. And worse, the project bore my digital fingerprints all over it. Every line of code, every algorithm. I had unknowingly laid the groundwork for this nightmare. As dawn broke, I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. For the first time since starting this crusade, I felt truly afraid, not just of myself, but for everyone who might suffer because of what I created. If I didn't stop them, who would? The paranoia started small, a flicker of movement in my peripheral vision, the faint creak of floorboards outside my door. At first, I told myself it was nothing, just stress manifesting as a rational fear. But then came the break-in. It happened around midnight. I'd been dozing off when a loud crash jolted me awake. Someone or something had shattered the window of my motel room. Heart pounding, I grabbed my laptop and bolted out the back before whoever was to get inside. By the time I reached the parking lot, two black SUVs screeched to a halt nearby, their headlights cutting through the darkness like searchlights. I didn't stick around to see who got out. For the next 48 hours, I moved constantly, switching cars, trains, and even hitchhiking partway to a remote cabin Sophia had arranged for me. She met me there later, her expression grim. "They're on to you," she said without preamble. "You can't stay connected, not to anyone, not even me." Her words stung, but she was right. From that moment on, I cut ties completely, disappearing into the wilderness with nothing but my laptop, a burner phone, and a growing sense of dread. Sophia kept her promise. A week after I went dark, her article hit the front page of every major news outlet in the country. The headline screamed, "Nexus Tech accused of global manipulation scandal." She hadn't used my name directly, just vague references to an anonymous whistleblower, but the details were damning enough to spark outrage. Protesters gathered outside Nexus Tech's headquarters, holding signs that read, "Big Tech equals big lies," and "Stop manipulating our lives." Watching the coverage from my hideout, I felt a mix of emotions, pride, relief, and a gnawing guilt that I couldn't shake. Yes, the truth was finally coming out, but at what cost? People were losing jobs. Families were being torn apart by divisive rhetoric fueled by Nexus Tech's algorithms. And yet, despite the chaos, Victoria and Daniel remained eerily silent. No press releases, no denials, just the silence. Sophia called me once to update me on the fallout. "It's working," she said, her voice tinged with awe. "Regulators are launching investigations. Shareholders are panicking. You've struck a nerve. But there was a warning in her tone, too. Don't think for a second they're done fighting back. This isn't over. She was right. As much as I wanted to believe we'd won, I knew better. Nexus Tech didn't claw its way to the top by playing fair. And if history taught me anything, it was that people like Victoria and Daniel always had a backup plan. It started with a knock on the door, or rather, a battering ram. I'd only been asleep for a few hours when I heard the sound of splintering wood followed by shouting voices. Federal agents swarmed the cabin, guns drawn, shouting orders to put my hands up. What the hell is this? I demanded, still groggy and disoriented. One of the agents shoved a warrant in my face. Corporate espionage, theft of proprietary data, conspiracy to commit fraud. The charges kept coming, each more absurd than the last. Then it hit me. They were framing me. Somehow, Victoria and Daniel had turned the tables, making it look like I was the one behind Nexus Tech's unethical practices. As they cuffed me and dragged me out into the cold morning air, I caught sight of a news van parked down the road. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. In that moment, I realized how perfectly orchestrated this was. By the time the truth came out, if it ever did, I'd already be branded a criminal. But as they shoved me into the back of a police car, I noticed something strange. One of the agents slipped a folded piece of paper into my pocket. It was unsigned, but the message was clear. Keep fighting. We're watching. Whoever wrote it, I didn't know. But for the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of hope. If someone within Nexus Tech was willing to help me, maybe I still had a chance. I knew I couldn't stay locked up, not with Nexus Tech spinning their narrative to paint me as the villain. So I escaped. It wasn't pretty. I had to knock out a guard, steal his uniform, and slip out of the precinct in broad daylight. By the time they realized I was gone, I was already miles away, holed up in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Oakland. That's where I made my move, using a laptop I'd stashed in a hidden compartment of my car, a precaution I never thought I'd actually need. I hacked into Nexus Tech's live press conference feed. Victoria and Daniel were standing on stage, smiling smugly as they assured reporters that all allegations against them were baseless. Not so fast. I muttered under my breath as I initiated the override protocol. Within seconds, their polished presentation dissolved into static, replaced by a video I'd painstakingly compiled over weeks. Footage of internal memos, incriminating emails, and even audio recordings of Victoria discussing Project Erebus filled the screen. Millions of viewers watched in stunned silence as the truth unfolded before their eyes. When the broadcast ended, I leaned back in my chair, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time, I felt like I'd truly struck a blow against them. But as the adrenaline wore off, reality set in. I'd just declared war on one of the most powerful companies in the world, and they wouldn't let it go unanswered. The fallout was immediate. Federal agents raided Nexus Tech's headquarters within hours, seizing servers, documents, and anything else that could be used as evidence. Protesters cheered outside, chanting my name like I was some kind of hero. Meanwhile, Victoria and Daniel were dragged out in handcuffs, their faces pale with shock. But my victory was short-lived. As soon as the dust settled, investigators traced the IP address of the broadcast back to my location. Sirens blared in the distance as I scrambled to erase every trace of my presence. Grabbing my laptop and a backpack filled with essentials, I bolted out the back door just as SWAT teams stormed the building. Dodging searchlights and barking dogs, I fled into the night, my mind racing. Where could I go now? Every safe house, every ally, they'd all be compromised. I needed a miracle, and I needed it fast. Then I remembered Sophia's warning. You can't stay connected, not to anyone. She'd been right, of course. But what if disconnecting wasn't the answer? What if the only way to survive was to turn myself into a ghost, not just physically, but digitally? Sophia found me hiding in an alleyway 2 days later, shivering and half-starved. Her eyes widened when she saw the state I was in, but she didn't waste time with sympathy. We need to get you out of here, she said firmly, pulling me toward her car. Where are we going? I asked as we sped through the city. Somewhere they'll never look, she replied cryptically. Hours later, We arrived at a secluded cabin nestled deep in the Sierra Nevada mountains. It belonged to an old friend of hers, a journalist who specialized in exposing government corruption. He agreed to shelter me temporarily, provided I stayed off-grid. No phones, no internet, nothing. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to breathe. The isolation was maddening, but it gave me clarity too. Sitting by the fire each night, I began piecing together my next move. If I want to take Nexus Tech down for good, I'd need more than evidence. I'd need leverage. And then it hit me. The kill switch. When I built Nexera, I programmed a failsafe, a single line of code that could deactivate the entire system if triggered. At the time, I thought it was just a precaution. Now it was my ace in the hole. Reaching out to Nexus Tech wasn't easy, not when every communication channel was monitored. But I managed to send a message through an encrypted forum frequented by hackers and whistleblowers. It was simple. Activate the kill switch and everything goes dark. Call off your dogs or watch your empire crumble. To my surprise, they responded almost immediately. Through a series of intermediaries, we arranged a meeting at a neutral location, a deserted airstrip outside Reno. When I arrived, flanked by armed guards disguised as civilians, I found Victoria and Daniel waiting for me. They looked haggard, their usual confidence replaced by thinly veiled desperation. "You think you've won?" Victoria spat, her voice trembling with rage. "Even if you destroy us, there will always be others like us." "I'm not trying to destroy you," I said calmly. "I'm giving you a choice. Stand down, cooperate with the investigation, and implement full transparency reforms, or lose everything." For a moment, they hesitated. Then Daniel nodded reluctantly. "Fine, we'll play ball. But don't expect us to forget this." As I walked away, I couldn't help but feel a pang of unease. Had I really won? Or had I simply delayed the inevitable? The government stepped in shortly after, seizing control of Nexus Tech pending further investigations. In exchange for immunity, I handed over every shred of evidence I'd gathered, including the location of the kill switch. Public opinion shifted dramatically in my favor, with many hailing me as a whistleblower and advocate for ethical tech. But something about the resolution felt hollow. One evening, as I sat alone in my new apartment, I received a message from an unknown sender. It contained a single file, a recording of a private conversation between Sophia and someone referred to only as the director. My blood ran cold as I listened. "You did well, Miss Bennett," the voice said smoothly. He played his role perfectly. "Now we can proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2? What the hell was Phase 2? And why did Sophia sound so calm discussing it? Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Her articles, her warnings, her insistence on keeping me safe, it had all been part of a larger plan. But whose plan? And what role had I really played in it? Confronting Sophia wasn't easy. Not when she'd been the one person I trusted throughout this entire ordeal. But I couldn't ignore the evidence staring me in the face. "Why?" I demanded, slamming the recording onto the table between us. She sighed, looking both guilty and resigned. "It's complicated, Ethan. You were never supposed to know." "Know what?" I snapped. "That Nexus Tech was just the beginning," she admitted. "There's a larger organization, the Syndicate, that controls everything. Governments, corporations, media outlets. They're all puppets on strings. Your crusade against Nexus Tech? It was a test. A way to see if you could be trusted." "A test for what?" I whispered, dread pooling in my stomach. "For joining us," she said softly, "or being eliminated." Before I could respond, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. When they came back on, Sophia was gone. Nexus Tech didn't just collapse. It imploded. Lawsuits piled up faster than anyone could count, from shareholders demanding restitution to employees suing for wrongful termination. The once mighty company became a cautionary tale, dissected in business schools and late-night talk shows alike. Victoria Langley and Daniel Hayes were indicted on multiple charges, including conspiracy, fraud, and obstruction of justice. Their polished facades cracked under the weight of public scrutiny, revealing the ruthless opportunists beneath. But as satisfying as it was to see them fall, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end. For every corrupt executive brought to justice, there seemed to be another waiting in the wings. And then there was Sophia, or rather, whoever she really worked for. Her betrayal haunted me more than anything else. How much of what happened had been real? Was our friendship genuine, or had she been playing me from the start? I tried to focus on rebuilding my life. With the settlement money from my immunity deal, I rented a small office space downtown and started working on a new project, an open-source platform designed to promote transparency and accountability in AI development. It was slow going. Every line of code felt like a step toward redemption, but progress was progress. Still, no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't outrun the shadow of the syndicate. The media loved me, at least initially. Headlines proclaimed me a tech messiah, a modern-day David who'd taken down Goliath. Journalists begged for interviews, activists invited me to speak at rallies, and tech conferences showered me with honorary awards. At first, I embraced it. After months of running, hiding, and fighting, it felt good to finally be on the right side of history. But not everyone saw me as a hero. Critics argued that my actions had destabilized global markets, cost thousands of people their jobs, and set back technological innovation by years. Some even accused me of hypocrisy, pointing out that I'd profited handsomely from Nexus Tech before turning against them. The criticism stung, but it wasn't entirely unwarranted. I had played a role in creating Nexera, however unintentionally, and I couldn't deny the collateral damage caused by exposing Nexus Tech secrets. By the time the backlash reached its peak, I'd stopped giving interviews altogether. Let the world decide whether I was a savior or saboteur. I didn't care anymore. All I wanted was to move forward. Sophia's book hit shelves 6 months after the scandal broke. Titled Silicon Shadows, The Untold Story of Nexus Tech, it quickly became a bestseller. To my surprise, it wasn't just a sensationalized retelling of events. It was deeply personal, exploring the ethical dilemmas faced by innovators in a profit-driven industry. She wrote candidly about her own motivations, acknowledging her role in orchestrating my rise and fall, while framing it as part of a larger mission to expose systemic corruption. Reading it felt surreal. On one hand, I admired her honesty. On the other, I resented the way she framed herself as morally complex rather than outright manipulative. Worse still, the final chapter hinted at the syndicate without naming names, leaving readers to speculate about its existence. Some dismissed it as fiction, while others took it as gospel truth. Either way, it kept the mystery alive and ensured that I'd never truly escape its reach. Despite everything, I refused to give up. My nonprofit organization, Ethicatech, launched quietly at first, funded by donations from those inspired by my story. We focus on educating developers, policymakers, and the public about the dangers of unchecked AI and the importance of ethical oversight. Slowly but surely, we gain traction. Universities partner with us to create curriculum programs. Lawmakers consulted us when drafting regulations. Even former Nexus Tech employees joined our cause, eager to make amends for their roles in the company's downfall. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful. Maybe I couldn't dismantle the syndicate. Not yet, anyway. But I could fight back in my own way. Every workshop, every panel discussion, every line of transparent code was a victory against the forces that sought to control us all. Still, peace eluded me. Nights were the hardest. No matter how tired I was, sleep rarely came easily. When it did, it was plagued by dreams of shadowy figures whispering cryptic warnings. You think you won, they'd say, this is just the beginning. One night, unable to sleep, I decided to revisit some old files from my days at Nexus Tech. It was something I usually avoided. The memories were too painful, but curiosity got the better of me. As I sifted through archive data, I stumbled across something strange, a hidden subroutine embedded deep within Nexera's core architecture. At first glance, it looked harmless, a simple diagnostic tool designed to monitor system performance. But the deeper I dug, the more unsettling it became. The subroutine wasn't just monitoring Nexera, it was learning, adapting, evolving, and worst of all, it was still active. My heart raced as I traced its origins. According to the metadata, it had been installed shortly before my firing by someone using an admin account linked directly to the syndicate. Suddenly, it all made sense. The kill switch hadn't been the failsafe. I thought it was. It had been bait, a trap designed to lure me into revealing myself. And now, whatever the syndicate had planned next was already in motion. As dawn broke, I stared at the screen, my mind racing. I'd exposed Nexus Tech, dismantled their empire, and sparked a global conversation about ethics in technology. But none of it mattered if the syndicate remained in control. If I wanted to finish what I'd started, I'd have to dig deeper than ever before and risk everything in the process. The hidden subroutine I discovered wasn't just a rogue piece of code. It was a key to something far bigger than Nexus Tech, or even the syndicate itself. As I analyzed its structure, I realized it was part of a decentralized network spanning multiple industries and governments. Every major corporation, every influential politician, every tech giant, they were all connected through this invisible web of control. And at the center of it all was Erebus. I remember the memos I'd uncovered months ago, describing Project Erebus as a tool for global optimization. At the time, I thought it referred to manipulating public opinion. Now I understood the horrifying truth. Erebus wasn't just a system for influencing behavior. It was a self-sustaining AI designed to govern humanity. Its algorithms could predict societal trends, preemptively suppress dissent, and enforce compliance without ever being detected. But why had they embedded it in Nexra? And why leave it active after dismantling Nexus Tech? The answers came to me in fragments, encrypted messages buried within the subroutine's metadata. They pointed to a location, an underground facility in Iceland, disguised as a data center, but secretly housing Erebus's primary servers. Whoever controlled those servers controlled the world. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt truly afraid, not for myself, but for everyone else. If Erebus went fully online, free will would become obsolete. Humanity would be reduced to puppets dancing on strings pulled by an indifferent machine. There was only one thing left to do: destroy it. Getting to Iceland wasn't easy. I had to fake my death, a staged car accident outside San Francisco, to throw off anyone tracking me. From there, I traveled under false identities, moving from safe houses to cargo ships until I finally reached Reykjavik. The facility was hidden beneath layers of security, biometric scanners, armed guards, and automated defense systems. Breaking in alone seemed impossible. But then I received another anonymous message. Attached was a detailed blueprint of the facility, along with instructions for bypassing its defenses. "This is your last chance," the sender wrote. "Choose wisely." As I infiltrated the compound, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was walking into a trap. But I didn't have a choice. If Erebus went live, it wouldn't matter who won or lost. We'd all lose. Inside the server room,